Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Prabhakar from the Delhi Entertainer. Today I will be talking about stencils. I'm not talking about stencils which are used in the artwork, but stencils which were used in the offices. In the 60s, 70s and till late 80s, when electrophotostat machines were not very popular or were very costly, and of course printing was also very costly. When in the offices, if you are required to get something typed which runs into maybe some 30-40 pages, or which is of repetitive nature, and of course which is used for a very shorter duration without making any changes, then it is to be a problem how to get it typed. Because when you get something typed, you can at the most take 4 or 5 copies, not more than that. And in those days photocopy was also not very popular because electrostat photo machines have not yet come. The photocopying is also used to be very tedious process of what we used to call as ammonia photocopying. Then if you want to go for print, if you only require something like 25, 50 or even 100 copies, printing was not a good option because the process is also very lengthy. First you have to give material, get it vetted, then give for a print, and if you get only 50 or 100 copies, it will not be cost effective. Then in that scenario, stencils have come to a good use and served the purpose very well. I think in this generation, very few people must be knowing what a stencil is or have seen the stencil material. When I joined in the job in early 80s, I have seen people cutting stencils in the office and using it for printing. So now I'll explain what a stencil is. This is a 3-layer hard sheet sort of a thing which has holes on the top of it. There is to be a very hard material on the top which you have to have holes like design. Then there is to be a back sheet. Upon that there is a carbon, normally the carbons which we use, the black carbon, and upon that there is to be a very thin material. All these were fastened at the top and at the bottom. You can see through them in the middle if you want to see them, just like this. So they were fastened at the bottom, they were fastened at the top. So that is what we used to call as stencil sheet. So in the offices we used to keep a good quantity of stencils, and whenever a material is to be got typed, maybe say 10 pages or 20 pages, say standard agreements or some terms and conditions which are to be annexed with various documents, even say something like 5-6 pages like appointment letter running into say 5-6 pages. So very frequently you have to issue an appointment letter. So all the standard terms and conditions used to be put in a printed form, done through a stencil system, and then we used to type the name of the person, designation, then other pay scales and all those things, then is to get it signed. So now I'll explain how this stencil is cut. So stencil, as it happens in the art form, whatever is written on the top sheet, it takes the images and you can take a reproduction of those images. So when a matter is to be typed, what the stenographers and typists used to do is that take a stencil sheet and put in the typewriter, but it is not put the way a normal paper is put in, because as I said that the top layer is very wafer thin. If you just don't handle it properly, it gets torn off, or the images come on the top, and whatever images come on the top, it will go for the print as well. So what they do is that there is to be a lever in the cylinder, so there is to pull that lever, so the gap is to be larger. So in that gap, unlike a where you put the paper, you put this inside the stencil and again pull back the lever and then roll, the way you roll the paper on a typewriter. So when it comes on the top, then there is to be a knob which is to be pulled to stencil mode. So normally in a typewriter there are 3 modes. Normal mode, when you type, the letters come in black. In multicolor ribbon, they used to have a layer down below for a red. Normally it is to be red color. So if you want to highlight something, then you just pull the knob to the middle, then whatever you type will come on the red color. Then there is a third lever, third stage, where if you pull that lever, that is called a stencil mode. So whenever you want to cut a stencil, you have to pull down the lever of the typewriter to the stencil mode. When you pull it to the stencil mode, whenever you type a letter, the impression which goes and hits the cylinder will be without a ribbon. That means when the stencil sheet is like that, if you say type A, the letter will go and hit that, and that gets cut to in the shape of A. So each letter which you are going to type is going to cut the upper sheet of a stencil just like that. So it is a very difficult task. Only experienced typists and stenographers used to do it, because unlike normal typing, where you can see the letters which are being printed in the ribbon, so you can read it. But in case of a stencil, since it is getting cut, so it is not so easy to read it comfortably. So you have to be extremely accurate, number one. Then the impression, your pressure on each of the letter has to be uniform. Otherwise what happens is that one letter will get cut, the other will not get cut, or sometimes the cutting of the sheet by the impressions, so there will not be uniformity. So when you take a printout, and some of the letters either won't come or will be illegible. So stencils are always cut by the expert typists or stenographers who are very senior, who know how to cut a stencil. Then after completing the page, if you have to remove it again and put another sheet, like how many number of sheets you have to type, you have to put that many sheets, and you keep typing it, then the impressions come on the stencil sheet. Then remove all of them. Sometimes you have to get it signed also, right? Suppose if you take 100 copies, your boss may not be able to sign all the 100 physically. So what there used to be a special pen for that. With that pen, again that pen also, when you just sign it, it also creates a small impression on that. By that impression, the sign also is to get printed. So we used to advise the people very carefully, whosoever is to sign it, we should tell them sign it carefully, because if you put more pressure, it will cut entire sheet. So after getting it signed, then there is to be cyclo-style machines. Normally we never used to have these cyclo-style machines in the office. So there used to be there are shops who are like, nowadays we have photostat copies shops. So we used to have shops which used to have stencil machine. So stencil machine is a small machine which we used to have a base in down below. Then there used to be a cylinder which was actually filled with some sort of a semi-liquid material is put in that, which is a very dark material, which actually creates the impressions. So which is put on the inside the cylinder. Then this stencil sheet is just cut from the below and pasted onto the cylinder. When it is put on the cylinder, right, because of the material which was there, black material which is there, so that cylinder is to take the impression of the sheet, whatever we have typed, they get impressed on that cylinder, right? Then there has to be sheets which are like, nowadays we use A4 size sheets, but these are very soft sort of papers. We used to, for stenciling purposes, we used to use bit thick material. Not the GSM is to be not that fine GSM. It is to be a rough material, because the impressions which get created by the material in the cylinder, they are such that if the paper is very thin and soft, the impression will not come. So that papers used to be a different type of papers to used for the stencil purposes. So after putting this, and we used to, any number of papers you want, there used to be a compartment to put the papers, and there used to be a handle to roll the cylinder. So of putting papers down below and putting the stencil material and taking the impression on that cylinder, then the fellow used to keep on rotating. With each rotation, one sheet goes and takes the entire print out, and the sheet comes and falls on the other side. So this fellow used to keep on rolling. With each roll of the cylinder, one paper is to be got printed. So once if that is over, again the cylinder has to be cleaned, and the same process is to go for second page, third page, fourth page. So the stencil cut and used to take print with the stencil machine is only one time purpose. Once it is done, whether you take 50 copies or 100 copies or whatever number of copies you want, and that is gone. So if again you want to have the same thing also, you have to cut the stencils all over again. So one has to be very careful while deciding how many number of copies you want. So in 70s, 80s, in all government offices as well as private sector offices, the routine printing used to be done through stencils and cyclostyling machine. Come 80s, maybe mid 80s or so, the electrostat photocopying machines have come, which are much faster than the other ammonia type of photostat machines. You put a paper, it will take the impressions, and any number of copies, even if you want 100 or 200 or 300 or 1000 copies, the photocopier itself takes out the copies. So with the use of the photocopying machines, the stencils have disappeared from the offices, and as a result the cyclostyle machines are also has gone away from the offices. If you still see some of the communication in the government offices in 70s and 80s, you will find that sort of a very peculiar type of a printing which was done by a cyclostyle machine. Incidentally, in 82, when I got my first appointment letter from IVP Company Limited, that letter was a cyclostyled letter only. All the terms and conditions running into something like 5-6 pages of my appointment in the accounts department of IVP Company Limited was done on a cyclostyling machine only. So still I have that as a record, and subsequently whatever appointment letters I got, first the doctorate metric printers have come, then now the latest printers have come. So we have stopped using the stencils. This is a very brief history of stencils, but so-called stencils are still being used for artwork, but the stencils have completely gone away from the offices, and the people in this generation might not have seen how a office stencil or a cyclostyle machines look like. So that's all for today. So next week I will come with another episode of things which touched our life and disappeared during our lifetimes. So it is S. Prabhakar signing off.